my wife and kids that we're going to be staying in someone's basement.
They tried to muzzle me by not allowing me to speak. And when that didn't work, they tried to muzzle me with a mask.
I would thank you all for allowing me to speak to you tonight, but you tried not to allow it, yet here I am. Now, you only give us 60 seconds, so let me get to the point. You are all child abusers. You prey upon impressionable children and indoctrinate them into your insane ideological cult, a cult which holds many fanatical views, but none so deranged as the idea that boys are girls and girls are boys. By imposing this vile nonsense on students to the point even of forcing young girls to share locker rooms with boys, you deprive these kids of safety and privacy and something more fundamental too, which is truth. If education is not grounded in truth, then it is worthless. Worse, it is poison. You are poison. You are predators. I can see why you try to stop us from speaking. You know that your ideas are indefensible. You silence the opposing side because you have no argument. You can only hide under your beds like pathetic little gutless cowards hoping we shut up and go away, but we won't. I promise you that.
Johnny's a boy with a big imagination. One day he's a dog, the next day a crustacean. Johnny's mom loves her son's make-believe time. You're Johnny the Walrus till you change your mind.
Matt Walsh is out with a new children's book. The book is called Johnny the Walrus. What is this about?
It sold out on Amazon in a few hours.
So I have embraced my true calling as a children's author, hence the cardigan. The book is about a little boy who's very imaginative and playful, and like I have 4 kids, and they all have an imagination.
Yeah.
And he likes to pretend to be different things, and one day he pretends to be a walrus. And unfortunately, his mother is very progressive and thus confused, and so she's convinced by the internet and by society that if your child is identifying as something, then he really is that thing. And so she tries to raise her child as a walrus, as a sort of trans walrus, respecting his self-identity. One morning, he came downstairs barking and clapping, wood spoons for tusks and sock fins a-flapping. He had spoons in his mouth. He was pretending to be a walrus. I'm Johnny the Walrus, he said with a roar.
Johnny the Walrus, nedo karalo guru.
This is a hot topic.
Yes.
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's good for us to have these conversations so people open their minds and relearn and unlearn to what we've been taught.
So I want this to be a safe place to talk about and learn.
As you can see, there's an ongoing evolution of language and how people can identify.
My next guest, author and conservative host of Daily Wire's The Matt Walsh Show, talking about his recently published children's book that has since been removed online by a popular large retail chain. Now, Matt says gender is not a social construct, but rooted firmly in biology. True?
True. As human beings, we have a sex, male or female, but as a biological scientific fact. Now, gender is a linguistic term. Words have gender. People don't. You can have whatever self-perception you want, but you can't expect me to take part in that self-perception or to take part in this kind of charade, this theatrical production. You don't get your own pronouns, just like you don't get your own prepositions or your own adjectives. You know, it's like if I were to tell you, my adjectives are handsome and brilliant, and no matter whatever you're talking about me, you have to describe me as handsome and brilliant because that's how I identify.
So you think it's a delusion?
Well, this is one of the problems with this left-wing gender ideology is that no one who espouses it can even tell you what these words mean. It's like, what is a woman?
Well,
can you tell me what a woman is?
No, I can't.
Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term. It includes people
That describes what?
people who identify as a woman.
What is that?
Was to each their own. Each woman, each man, each person is going to have a different relation with their own gender identity and define it differently.
So
you
that's
want to
the
reduce
problem.
women, you want to reduce men down to maybe just their genetics, our genitals,
No.
our chromosomes, right? That's what you're
What
saying.
you want to
is that
do is
that's what we are at the end of
what
the
you
day.
want to do is appropriate women. You want to appropriate womanhood
Okay.
and turn it into basically a costume that could be worn.
Joining us on stage is Dr. Susie Denbo, Associate Professor at Kent State University. Dr. Denbo, how do you feel those who oppose using pronouns are taking the wrong approach in this conversation?
There's the extreme approach that you are admittedly taking. And then there's also just ordinary people that might not be comfortable with the language change.
She began by saying that my view is extreme. Okay, so the view that every single person on Earth has held up until 15 seconds ago is extreme. They are conflating gender and sex because on one hand they say, well, you got your biological sex, but then your gender is whatever social construct. But then they turn around and say that trans women are women. So a man who identifies with the gender, the social construct of womanhood, actually is a woman.
Part of me wants to ask why you care so much, because it's really not that big of a deal.
Oh, can I answer that? I care about the truth. So basic truth matters. I want to live in a society where people care about the truth. I care about children, and these insane ideas about gender are being foisted on kids, and that bothers me quite a bit. I care about the women who are having their opportunities stolen from them. I care quite a bit, yeah.
I wanted us to have a safe place to be able to talk about this, and it seems like we should just keep the dialogue going and hopefully find some middle ground.
What do you say to parents? A parent comes to you and says, my 8-year-old son is telling me he's a girl.
Yeah, great. You're going to have him do an experimental procedure that creates the most suicidal ideation of any other population 7 to 10 years after, transition. And here's what I tell parents. You don't have the right to medically transition your child.
We have no research on long-term hormone use. We will be seeing the first generation of long-term hormone use. And we already know, at least with 10 years of hormones, you're giving yourself cancer.
What's your message to parents who are trying to cope with this?
The first thing is to tell parents that they're not alone. It is our responsibility as a parent to be the frontline defense for our children. And I know with my child, a lot of people will say, was it worth it? Because you now seemingly have lost your child. And I'll say, yeah, but at least I've saved my conscience and my morals and my convictions. And when my child turns 25 and says, Dad, where were you? I'll say, I was there. I was fighting as hard as I could. I was not prepared to let this happen.
Does this really matter is another question. So,
matters for those who are getting double mastectomies when they're 16.
Why should we care if we live in a society where gender is fluid?
Well, I cared because my government decided that I had to call people by the terms that they designated, or I'd be subject to legal penalties. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't care what your reason is. You don't get control of my tongue.
We live in a climate now in which no one seems to care about the safety of women and girls who are going through a very developmentally challenging time in their lives. They may not want to share spaces with their male peers. I would not be surprised in a few years, there will no longer be women's sports. It will literally be men's sports and transgender sports.
The question being asked by the trans person is a legitimate one. How can I be happy? The answer being given by having my body transformed to look like the other gender, by having myself pumped full of hormones, clearly isn't working. And we have to find a better and the more humane way of dealing with individuals who are struggling with gender dysphoria.
I have the utmost compassion for people who suffer from gender dysphoria. It's a nightmare for them and their families. The vast majority, up to 90% of kids, if they go through a normal puberty, they're going to be okay. They will be at peace with their bodies, and they will have avoided dangerous and experimental medical interventions and surgeries.
maybe we're up against a battle here, up against a hill that perhaps, we're